Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to do a review of my Smith & Wesson M&P 1522. This is a dedicated 22 caliber AR style rifle. So it comes to you from the factory set up to take 22 long rifle ammunition as opposed to 223 or 5.56 like your typical AR. Now there's some pros and cons to doing something like this versus the 22 conversion kits you can get from somebody like CMMG, or I'm sure there are other companies that make it. I haven't researched that a lot because I like the dedicated 22 rifle option better personally. And let's get into that now, actually. The big pros I see for this gun are, one, is its own thing. You don't have to worry about, did I leave the 22 bolt in my normal duty self-defense, whatever AR. And the other big pro is it's lightweight. We'll get into that a little bit when we start talking about the rifle itself. But it's much lighter than a standard AR, so it's really good for new shooters like kids or maybe the wife or just anybody who's not familiar with guns. It's a really cool looking gun. I mean, it has that AR style look to it, but at the same time, it's not super heavy. It's not going to have a lot of recoil. It's not going to have a lot of noise. So maybe a good option to get somebody interested in guns or started in guns. So let's just start talking about some of the features of the rifle itself. I won't talk too much about the conversion kits because honestly I don't have a whole lot of experience with those. But for me, personally, just changing out the bolt carrier and doing all that stuff, that's more than I want to deal with, and I would rather just have the setup dedicated rifle. But onto the gun itself. This is a Magpul storage stock. I can't remember which model this is. I'll annotate that here, right here in the video, just to let you guys know. But this is the one that takes batteries up here in these two tubes on the sides. It has one on each side. This one will accept 3 CR123 batteries in each tube for a total of 6. And it also has this little storage door here in the side. This was the stock I originally had on my normal 5.56 AR. And when I decided to upgrade it to an FDE Magpul STR, which is essentially the same stock, but it doesn't have the door, and it has enough space for 2 CR123s in the tubes instead of 3. Relatively minor difference. Slightly smaller footprint stock. When I decided to upgrade to that stock, I said, hell, why don't I just replace the stock that comes on this thing with this, just to give me a little bit nicer of a stock. This came, by the way, with all mil spec, quote unquote, stuff. So your standard mil spec M4 stock, standard mil spec M4, M16, A2 style grip, and I've upgraded a few things, as we'll see as we continue on through the video. But the big reason why this is important is this is a mil spec diameter mil spec diameter stock tube stock. So it's made to work with the mil spec diameter versus the commercial diameter. If you don't know the difference, some ARs out there have a buffer tube that is a different size than mil spec, and those are in the commercial category. And this rifle accepts the mil spec diameter stocks. So if you're looking to get one of these and upgrade the stock like I did, you're going to want to know that. It's just a standard plastic tube. There's actually no spring or anything in this like there would be on a standard AR, and we'll get more into this when we get into disassembly. There is some storage in this that I'm not going to take the stock off to get to right now, but there's just a little, it's a hollow tube. There's a little rubber butt cap back here on the end that you can put batteries or something like that in. I found personally that rubber butt cap did not stay in place, especially if I was using the gun with the mild 22 recoil and stuff, or just taking it in and out of the gun safe. I found that little rubber butt cap would come out a lot. So I don't use it anymore. I can't even get to it now with the Magpul stock in place. So that's not a big deal for me, but it is there if you guys decide you want to use it. Something else I did to this rifle, since we're going from back to front, is I added this sling plate. This is an ambidextrous loop sling plate, so you can clip a sling to either side. And I did that because I got this in a subscription box. This came in one of my Iraq Veteran man cans. I decided to go ahead and just throw it on there because there wasn't a really good way in the stock configuration to mount a sling. I mean, I could put a QD cup back here on the stock, but I like to run my slings on ARs, at least up here at the front of the buffer tube where it meets the receiver. And so just to translate that to this rifle, this little plate was the best way to do that. I ended up having to grind out a little bit down here just to make it fit because it's designed to be put on in front of the buffer tube. And I just glued it on there. I don't remember if I used super glue or Gorilla Glue or something, but it hasn't come loose on me at all. It works just fine. It had a pretty good friction fit to begin with because I didn't grind it out too much. So it kind of friction fit on there, and then I just glued it to make it work. It's redneck as hell, but roll tide. So, moving on. It does have a standard profile M4 charging handle. However, it's not a standard charging handle, as we'll see when we get to the field strip portion of the video. It also came with a standard style polymer selector lever here that was only one-sided for right-handed shooters. I replaced it with this badass lever. I can't remember who makes this either, but I used to have this on my AR before I changed it out, and I wanted an ambi safety lever, so I figured, what the hell, I'll throw it on the gun. I will say, if you're going to change out the safety on this gun, be very careful, because I found out when I was doing this, you can see there's a little screw right there, and if you over tighten the screws on the sides too much, you can actually cause it to bind, and it won't move for you. I've got it loosened up enough that it moves freely, but you're going to want to check that and make sure you lock tight those screws if you do convert it to something like this or something that uses screws. I also changed out the standard M4 pistol grip with the Magpul K2 grip. I just like this grip angle a lot better. It's a bit more vertical than your standard M4 grip. The M4 grip is something more like this. I just don't like that grip as much because when I grip the gun, and I'm doing this left-handed for the camera, but when I grip it and put it to my shoulder, I feel like there's a lot of a gap between the back of the grip and the meat of the palm of my hand when I shoulder the rifle naturally with that more aggressive angle. And with this one, I feel like I get more of a purchase on the grip, and it's just more ergonomic and controllable for me. Your mileage may vary. Pick the grip that you want. I like the Magpul K2 non-rubberized grip. Nothing super fancy about that. It's pretty easy. You just take a screw out, put a new screw in. I will say that with this one, because I had actually changed the grip on this rifle a couple of times, that doing it often enough, you will strip out the threads that are built into the bottom of the receiver. They are polymer threads. There's no metal insert in there. So I stripped those out when I put this grip on. I just ended up Gorilla Gluing it back into those threads. Just put some Gorilla Glue down in that hole, put that screw in nice and tight, let it sit and cure for a couple of days, and it hasn't moved or budged. There's no wiggle. I'll see if I can show you guys that there's no wiggle or anything in this grip. I mean, it's perfect. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Never going to change it because those threads are already stripped and I don't want to mess with it anymore. Moving a little bit farther forward, you have your standard pick rail across the top, just like you would on, say, like an M4 or something like that, a standard AR-15 style carbine. And it does go up into the handguard as well. Again, just like a normal AR-15 would. It has a brass deflector here that's hollowed out in the back, but that doesn't really matter because it's only 22 recoil anyway. And no forward assist. Not really an issue. Personally, I don't see a need for a forward assist on an AR anyway. You guys may disagree, and that's totally fine. My own personal opinion, but especially on 22, I don't need a forward assist. If I get a malfunction, for me, this is a plinking and training kind of gun. I'll just clear the malfunction and call it a day. The gun also came with a standard AR-15 mag release button on this side. I've upgraded to a Magpul enhanced version that's a little bit extended more towards the back, just because I've said this in previous videos, but with my fingers and the length of my fingers, if I have a proper grip on the AR, that's where my finger wants to stop. So I would actually have to break my grip a little bit to reach forward to hit that button. And I prefer just to keep my grip nice and solid as it is. I don't want to break it to bring it forward. So I like this button personally. Big fan. Very inexpensive part. But again, if you have longer fingers or you don't want an extended mag release on your button, rock on. The stock one will work just fine. It has a standard mil spec AR trigger in it and a molded in extended winter style trigger guard. So there's a little bit more room in here than your standard AR M4 style gun. And something about this gun that's really nice is it accepts a lot of mil spec parts. Not all, obviously, but the stock that we already talked about, the grip, the safety, the trigger, the magazine release, the magazine catch, the bolt catch / release. These are all mil spec parts. So if you wanted to upgrade the trigger for whatever reason, let's say you did a lot of, I don't know, if you have a competition in your area that's rimfire tactical style guns, you could put a Geisley trigger in this and it should work just fine. I haven't done it personally, so don't quote me on that, but it's a mil spec trigger. It's just like the trigger that came in my Smith & Wesson 5.56 AR. So should work just fine. A lot of mil spec parts in this thing. Like I said, I've changed this out, I've changed this out, I've changed this out. It should work for you just fine. Now, moving forward a little bit more, we've got your standard fenced magwell. So it has the fencing here. Sorry, I'm doing this through the viewfinder. Around the magazine release button, which is nice. It helps prevent it from getting accidentally actuated, especially if you don't have an aftermarket button on it, just a standard one. Magwell in it has a little bit of flaring, as you can see right there, to help with magazine insertion. And then it has this proprietary, aka not mil spec, polymer rail on it. Now this is an older version of the gun. The newer versions have a slightly longer M-LOK slotted polymer forearm rail thing. And personally, I think that's better than this quad rail version that you see here, just because one, it is a little bit longer, gives you a little bit more room to, add accessories, and if you want to do that. And it also, it's M-LOK, right? Like, I love M-LOK. Everything that I do with every gun that has M-LOK available, I'm going to do M-LOK. That's just my jam. That's my thing. Quad rails, they make the handguard bigger. If it's aluminum especially, they make it heavier. They're rough and they have sharp edges, and if they can catch on gear and clothing and your hands and cut your hands open. If you don't believe me, go out and do some actual training with an AR that has a standard quad rail on it and look at your hands afterward if you're not wearing gloves. So I'm a big fan of the new M-LOK design. However, this works perfectly fine, especially because it's polymer. Doesn't add a lot of weight. It is what it is. And then the barrel, I'd say, is a pretty good profile. Kind of a thicker 22 barrel. It's probably about as thick as the thicker portions out on the end of an M4 cut barrel for like an AR-15. And I don't see any issues with it. It's a pretty accurate gun, especially for 22 shooting Walmart ammo, which is what I typically shoot. And yeah, no concerns about the barrel whatsoever. This one comes with a birdcage style flash hider out on the end. And if you guys are very astute, you'll notice this thing isn't timed like a 5.56 flash hider is. For one thing, there's no flat on the bottom to act as a compensator. This is just a flash hider. And this gun in particular is a California model. So I bought this when I was in California, and the only real difference for this gun versus a non-California model of this gun that I could tell was that the flash hider on the end is permanently attached. I don't know if it's pinned and welded or what, but it doesn't move. I actually tried to spin the flash hider off one night before I knew that that was the case, and I ended up turning the barrel in the receiver and bending up a couple of the internals. Now, I was able to bend them back myself. I didn't have to send it to Smith & Wesson for any warranty work. The gun has been 100% reliable. I have no issues. That's just something to take note of. Make sure if you get one of these that you ask Smith & Wesson if the flash hider on that rifle is permanently attached or not. And if it is, don't try to take it off unless you really know what you're doing, because you could potentially mess up the gun entirely. There are models like your standard non-hellhole of a state model where you can take the muzzle device off and then you could thread on a tri-lug for a 22 can or just a direct thread 22 can or whatever the case may be. If you wanted to suppress this model, you can get something like a Griffin armament suppressor that's made to go over your standard M4 flash hider, and that would probably work just fine. I haven't tried it out, but I feel like based on the design, and I've seen a lot of these in my life, that it would work just fine and it would suppress the gun. So other things I've done to the gun, I changed out the standard sights. The sights that came on this model were not Magpul flip-ups like what come on a lot of the models that you get today. They were actually these fixed, you could adjust them, but they were fixed as far as they didn't fold down. They weren't backup sights. They were intended to be dedicated iron sights that just stayed in the front and the rear. You could adjust the front for elevation. You could adjust the rear for windage. It had the two different size peep apertures, but they didn't fold down out of the way. They're made out of metal. They're kind of heavy. I think they look ugly, so I just replaced them with these Magpuls. Not too hard. And then I put a Magpul AFG on it because I used to really like AFGs. Now I'm more of a vertical grip guy, but I don't have a vertical grip to put on this one, and I haven't been spending money on this gun lately because I've been spending money on other guns and other things lately. The AFG works just fine. It's a great grip. I'll probably upgrade this to a vertical grip at some point. Just not an immediate concern for me. And then I put a Magpul railed sling attachment point, RSA, right here because that's where I like to run my sling attachment on my 5.56 AR. And I try to set this up as closely as I can to my 5.56 AR in terms of ergonomics, just to make it as easy of a transition for training as possible. Now, I talk about training. That's one of the big benefits I see of this gun is you can take this out, you can train with it just like you would your normal AR. It's lighter weight, so you're not going to get as tired carrying it around and doing transitions and stuff with it. You can probably train longer, and you can train way cheaper because 22 ammo is less expensive than 5.56 ammo. That's just the way it is. Or even 223. It's still cheaper. That's something I really like about this platform. The other nice thing about it is, and this magazine's loaded, I'm not going to take the time to unload it on camera, but this is a 25 round magazine for this gun. Of course, I did have to get a 10 round magazine with it when I got it in California, but thank God I'm in a free state so I can get some more of these things. The magazine does allow the gun to lock open on the last shot fired, so it is in every way the same training wise as a normal AR-15 is. If it doesn't lock open on the last shot, it's because there was some issue either with the ammo or excuse me, or the magazine or the gun. So you may want to look into that. It's not like some of these other guns out there or some of these conversions where they don't lock open on the last shot fired. And that, to me, I don't like as a training gun because it's a difference from your duty gun that you have to acknowledge and understand while you're training with it. And to me, that just kind of messes up the mental, I don't even know, the mental adaptation to that platform. So that's enough jabbering about the details of the outside of the gun. Let's go ahead and do some field strip. So in order to field strip it, it's just like a standard AR, at least to begin with. You have these two pins here that you push across, one in the back, one in the front, and they are not Mil Spec pins. So you can't trade this out for an AR-15 takedown pin set. You're going to have these proprietary pins, and this one in the front is very tight. I may have to have a tool to push it out a little further, and I'm going to. So if you run into that problem, just take a 22 round or a 5.56 round or whatever, push it across a little bit, and then pull it out. Pretty easy to do. From there, if you just leave this one pushed in, you can hinge it open, or you can do what I do. I just kind of break it open. I have to do it over my leg because, sorry, bump the camera. The receivers here are kind of a tight fit, which is a good thing for accuracy, in my opinion. But it can make it kind of fun to take apart. Trying to do this without banging the table even more and mess up the video for you guys. Alright guys, finally got it apart for you. Had to play around with it a little bit, but here it is. So it looks a lot like a standard AR-15 upper and lower, at least from the exterior. Let's look at the lower real quick. You can see here, no spring, no buffer, no nothing. Just a hard plastic backer on the back. So that helps cut down the weight for sure, just a little bit. Your normal M4 style trigger components on the inside, nothing fancy there. You've got your bolt catch and release up here in the front, your ping pong paddle. And I've actually tried. There's a little ramp. I'm going to see if I can get it focused for you guys. There's a little ramp right here where my finger is inside the magazine well. And that actually prevents you from being able to insert a standard AR-15 magazine in this. So even if you wanted to, you couldn't use this as your lower for a 5.56 upper without doing some serious work. And because of where the ping pong paddle is situated, you wouldn't even be able to maintain this capability if you were to mill that out and make it fit within a standard AR mag. I don't recommend doing any of that. I mean, if you want to do something like that, just buy a 5.56 and get a 22 conversion kit if that sounds like it's more up your alley. This is a dedicated 22 rifle, and that's all I'm ever going to use it for. So nothing super fancy about the lower. It is made out of polymer, by the way. Both the upper and lower are made out of polymer. So that does contribute to the lightweight for sure. Makes the gun much lighter than the aluminum AR version would be. So we'll put that aside and we'll look at the lower. Now, this charging handle, like I said, does look an awful lot like a Mil Spec charging handle, other than the fact that it's made out of plastic instead of aluminum. But when I pull this apart, just pull the bolt out and everything, you'll see that is not an AR charging handle. That is very different. It's shorter. It doesn't have the little lip on the front end. It doesn't have the hole for the gas key and the gas tube because there is no gas system in this rifle. It's direct blowback, just like most 22s are. And again, made out of plastic. You can get upgraded versions of this. I know there's an aluminum one that is ambidextrous and it's wider on both ends, or both sides I should say, from Tactical 22. That's an upgrade I do want to do to this rifle. I think they're about 60 bucks or so. But I have an ambi charging handle on my 5.56 AR, and I'd like to have an ambi charging handle on this gun, especially once I put an optic on it, just to make it a little bit easier to run. And the fact that it's aluminum, this is one of those parts, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know I have some weirdness about plastic parts. This is one of those parts I would prefer to be made out of metal. That's just me. But it works just fine. It's got the trough in here that the bolt rides in so you can operate the bolt. It's non-reciprocating, just like a normal AR. Nothing much to say about that. I will say, actually, one more thing. You could drive out that roll pin and probably put an extended latch in this if you wanted a cheaper or possibly easier upgrade than buying the ambi aluminum one. And you could have an extended latch on it if that's something you're interested in doing. For me, I'll just change out the charging handle one of these days. Again, this rifle's not a priority for me to upgrade. We'll talk about the bolt group here in a second, because taking that apart and putting it back together can be kind of a chore. But the receiver itself, again, made out of polymer, the upper at least. You got the trough in the top for the charging handle to ride in. You've got your rear trunnion here. And this actually, when I tried to take the flash hider off and was cranking on the muzzle device, this actually is what turned inside the gun. So again, I've had no issues with it. It hasn't come out of headspace or anything. It just decided to move on me a little bit. You've got a feed ramp in there. I'll try to get a better view of that for you guys. Yep, so you can see, if I can stop bumping the camera, the feed ramp kind of down in there. There we go. And then you've got a fixed ejector on the other side that's actually mated to the trunnion. So the ejector isn't back here in the receiver somewhere. It's not part of the bolt. It's just this fixed ejector right there. That's one other way this gun departs from a standard AR. Nothing else too crazy going on in there. Again, your barrel. It's probably the heaviest part of the gun, honestly, is the barrel. But it doesn't feel super front heavy or anything like that. It is a pretty good size profile barrel, especially, again, for 22 long rifle. Not a whole lot else to say about this. So let's put that aside and talk about the bolt assembly. Now, taking this thing apart and putting it back together isn't too complicated. It's not a 1911 full field strip or anything. I mean, it's fairly straightforward, but there are some times when you kind of feel like you want three hands putting it back together. Let's just go ahead and take it, or actually let's talk about it before we take it apart. This piece back here just butts up against the back of the receiver where your buffer would go in a standard AR, right there. And all that does is stay in place. On top, you've got a recoil spring and a guide rod. The recoil spring is non-captive, so when you take this apart, be careful. That rod will go shooting across the room on you if you're not. These two rails here are actually the things that bent when I decided to try to take the muzzle device off this gun. They just kind of torqued around a little bit. I was able to bend them back into shape, and no issues from then on, but I learned my lesson. Don't try to take the muzzle device off this gun. And then your relatively heavy blowback 22 bolt right here. You can see the bolt face with the firing pin hole in the top. There's your extractor. Nothing crazy going on. And this is the little nub that engages with your charging handle so you can actually charge the rifle. So to take it apart, you want to take your bolt in the front and push back just a little bit. It's right about there. Now, when you do that, there are these two little cuts. I'll show you when I get it apart on the side of this guide rod. You lift the guide rod up out of this plastic extension here. Helps to hold your thumb on the front of the guide rod. Lift it up. This is where that spring can shoot across the room. Spring comes off. You can then take your bolt off of those rails. You can even take your guide rod out. So there are those flats I was telling you about with the guide rod, and those just interface with these two cuts right here in the top of this piece, just like so. And then it just rides in there just like that. So that's how you would disassemble this to completely clean it if you wanted to do that. A lot of times, especially if I haven't put more than a couple hundred rounds through this at the range, I won't disassemble this to put it back together. I will, or to put it back together, to clean it. I will just clean it. I like to Q-tip clean my guns. That's just what I do when I clean my guns. But I'll Q-tip clean what I can get to, and then I will just put some oil on these rails to give it some extra lube, especially because it's a 22. I like to run my 22s pretty wet because they like to gunk up and malfunction on me otherwise. So putting this back together, kind of fun, not really. You guys can see the oil from how wet I run this gun. Take your guide rod, put it back through this hole. Now with your bolt face forward, you want the big flat end of the guide rod in the same direction. Just put that through the hole. Don't worry about trying to keep those flats vertical at this point because they're going to move around on you. Recoil spring goes over that guide rod. Keep that pushed all the way in. You see how the guide rod is longer than the spring. That's what causes some of these issues. Now, take your bolt. Make sure you line up the cuts in the bolt with the rails of this little plastic / rail piece. Don't know what this is called. Don't really care. And then I like to line up that spring to make sure it's going to hit the plastic retainers for the guide rod. And the reason for that is when I push this in enough and I pull back on the spring, I have to make sure, see it almost went flying there. Make sure you keep that compressed. Pull this spring back. See, just kind of makes you wish you had 3 hands. Makes you invent some new cuss words for sure. It's not the easiest process to do, but I'm going to do it for you guys. If you think this is boring and you don't want to watch this, you want to fast forward, it won't hurt my feelings any, I promise. Try to keep that. And there goes the spring. I'll be back in a second, guys. All right, now that I have my spring recovered and most of the dog hair off of it, I'll put it back on the guide rod. Get everything back in position. There's some more dog hair I missed. This is why I don't take this gun apart all the time. I like to typically field strip my guns when I get them back from the range and do a nice good clean, but I don't really do that with this gun, and you can see why. All right, so once you've exposed those flats there, it's really hard to do on camera, you want to try to turn it so that the flats line up from there to go into that plastic piece. This is where it can be really difficult. I'm actually going to have to pull it off camera to line that up so I can press this against my body while I turn the guide rod. But there we go. I think I got it. All right. So I've got the guide rod positioned just right, and I'm going to push the rail piece in just enough that I can lay those flats down inside that plastic piece, and it goes back together. Not the most fun thing ever to do. From there, take your upper, take your recoil or your charging handle. I'm so flustered now, I'm inventing new words for parts. Line this up, and the nice thing about this is you don't have to put your T-handle in first like you do on an AR. You can just make these two parts up, throw them in the back of your upper like so, if I can do this on camera, and send them forward and send them home. Make sure you click your bolt all the way in, and you're done with the upper. Take your lower, pin it back on your upper, just like you would on your 5.56 gun. I like to do the front pin first, so I get that lined up, push through, then I can push my lower or my rear pin in, just like so. Pretty simple, pretty easy to do. Guns back together. Do a quick function check if that's your thing. Voila. So, what do I think of the gun overall? Now that we've done the field strip, we've talked about materials and parts and things like that. I don't think it's any secret to you guys, if you're still watching the video, that I like this gun a lot. Again, there are some advantages to having a conversion kit for a standard 5.56 over this. I mean, you can run it with whatever you've got on the gun. So your light, your optic, the sling that you have, everything is just right there. You're just changing out a bolt. You're going to have to buy magazines either way because these are proprietary magazines. So that's not really a factor either way for one system or the other. I just kind of like having the dedicated rifle. For me, this just kind of makes the most sense. Especially, I like to take a lot of new shooters out to the range and get them introduced to firearms. And shooting something like this has that cool factor. Like I said, it's an AR-15. It looks cool. It feels cool in the hand, but it's a 22. It's not going to recoil much. It's not going to have that loud concussive blast that a 5.56 AR would. It's lightweight. So they're not going to get tired just holding the thing up and trying to aim. And I mean, you guys remember when you first started shooting, you're holding the rifle up and you're trying to aim very precisely at the little center of the bullseye. Your arms get tired. This isn't going to do that as badly. It's going to be a more fun experience. So for me, I like this option. That's about all I really wanted to say about this gun, guys. Kind of a quicker review for a rifle. I kind of figured my first rifle video would be a bit longer. Quick tip for you guys. The reason for that is I actually have already tried to film a review on my IWI Tavor. I tried like 15 or 20 times to get the review done. It was just one thing after another that prevented me from getting a good quality video for you guys put together. But that video was like 40 minutes long by the time it would have been all put together and done. So I figured this would take a little longer to film than it actually has. But anyway, thank you guys for watching the video. I really, really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. I mean, I do look at my channel analytics and I see, you know, how many people or how long people typically watch the video. And most of the time it drops off after the first few minutes. So if you're still watching, you're a real fan. I really appreciate you. You're an amazing person. And yeah, it helps the channel out a lot. So if you guys like the video, if you like what you saw in the video, hit the subscribe button, like the video, give it that thumbs up, share it with your friends, share the work, help support the channel. If there's anything about this gun that you have questions about, if you have your own and you have some experiences with it, especially if you have the new version with the M-LOK handguard, post that down in the comments. If there's anything else you'd like me to talk about or review, post that in the comments as well. So thanks, guys. Y'all have a great day. Roll Tide, and I'll see you next time.